I love the Final Fantasy series, but I haven't played a game since Final Fantasy VII. Yes, I did play the remake a couple years ago, and I liked it. But other than that, it's pretty much for me been all of the original Final Fantasy games up through 7, and I think I dabbled around a little bit with 9, rented it from a video store or something like that, and for whatever reason it just didn't sink its hooks into me. But with Final Fantasy XVI here, and looking really good. Yes, a lot different than the previous games, but really good. I'm kind of hoping that it's going to swing me back into the Final Fantasy fold, get me more reinvested, get me more interested. There's a lot of things that I saw in Final Fantasy XVI that I want to talk about, so let's get into it. As we all know, the Final Fantasy games are not a cohesive story. There's obviously themes and characters, even to some extent, that extend through all of the universe and the different games, but for the most part, it's a series that you can play without ever having known anything about the previous games. But one of the tendrils that they all share are the stories. The stories in all the Final Fantasy games are what make them impactful, what make them special to me specifically. And so many of these stories are engaging and heartfelt. And again, I'm really only talking from the first-person perspective of the first 7 games, because even though I've seen clips and I've watched some walkthroughs of other Final Fantasy games, it's not quite the same. So in these original, very simple looking games, we have these deep themes of friendship and loss and loyalty and good versus evil and mega corporations versus small individuals and people fighting back. And we have the stories of friendship and the stories of sacrifice. You know, at the core of every Final Fantasy game is these, fantastical stories. Obviously, we've got magic and time travel and everything else, but we've got these core tenets that keep bringing us back to our own world and putting us in those situations and enabling us to see ourselves and our fellow man in the characters that they've given us. And for me, that's huge, because there are so many games out there that are just hack and slash or they're shoot 'em ups, and I love those games. I play pretty much everything I can get my hands on, but it doesn't really connect the same way that I think some of the Final Fantasy games do, in that you can see yourselves in the characters. You can see your friends and the people around you in the characters. You can see the people you don't like in some of the characters as well. And so I think that those tethers of bringing those characters in and those stories that they weave and the themes that go through them is really important. And I think that Final Fantasy XVI, from what we've seen so far, it's there. There's those themes already, even though they're presented in a totally different fashion than I'm used to in my history with Final Fantasy. I think they're there. You've also got in the series some incredibly memorable characters. I mean, we have characters in Final Fantasy games that have transcended the series, that have exploded out into mainstream culture and into other gaming series as well. I mean, if you look at Cloud from Final Fantasy VII, he's everywhere. People see Cloud and they know that's a Final Fantasy game, or they know that that's a video game in general, not just a cartoon. And each game has really given us a diverse cast of characters that we can get to know and love, and or hate. In the first game, we have Garland, who's the first named character, I think, at all in Final Fantasy, and he's not somebody we come to like. And we've seen that character, at least the archetype of that character, expressed over so many other games in the series. And we see different characters just continue to weasel their way into pop culture in different ways. And they've become such beloved characters, even though most of them only last for one game. I don't know, it's incredible. The character work that they've done, even in those old games with the simple pixel presentation of them, is a masterpiece in my opinion. So I think the characters that we've seen so far in Final Fantasy XVI bring a lot of that love of the character development and the way that they present themselves and the themes that they possess already that we've seen so far. I want to get into that world and play around in it. Every Final Fantasy game, from the very simplest game to the very most complex game that we've seen, has some of the most amazing visuals for the time period and for the systems that they've been developed on. Obviously, we look back at those first few games now and we think that they don't look very special, but at the time they were groundbreaking. I wasn't there for all of them, but I remember a few of them at release, and I can tell you that it was just next world. It was next, I don't want to say next generation because that connotes consoles, but it was huge. The amount of love and effort that was put into those games to look as good as they did in the time period that they came out was just phenomenal. And Final Fantasy XVI continues to look amazing. Every inch of everything we've seen has screamed budget, has screamed money, has said this has been worked on for a long time by many people, and we are trying to present the best thing possible to you. And every one of these games has amazing sound. Part of that is due to the same composer being there for all of these different games. Uematsu has been there since the very beginning and has continued to make phenomenal music for these games. You've got the amazing different styles of gameplay throughout all of the Final Fantasy games. I mean, yes, we start out with the very, very, very most simple turn-based combat in the entire world, and we move on to a little more detailed turn-based. So we move on to a little bit different of an action-based, and then we move on to what we're seeing now with Final Fantasy XVI, which is pretty much just free-flowing action. And yes, the gameplay is probably going to draw a decent bit of criticism from people who are old Final Fantasy fans. But for me, it's what's exciting, because I still love the turn-based games. I still really enjoy that style of gameplay, but for me, like, I'm looking for something a little bit innovative. I don't want the same thing repeated over and over. And so what we've seen so far from Final Fantasy XVI, what we know about the combat system, it's what I'm looking for. It's kind of the itch I have right now. So maybe I'm putting too much weight on the shoulders of Final Fantasy XVI. I mean, it looks awesome, and I'm sure it's going to be awesome. But I really want this game to make me want to get back into the world of Final Fantasy. And I know you can hop in and out at every point. That's kind of the point of the series, is that it's not all a cohesive thing. But if I can get into Final Fantasy XVI, maybe I can go back and pick up some of those games I've missed. So what do you think? Do you think Final Fantasy XVI is going to help you stay involved in the series? Is it going to kick you out because the gameplay is a little bit too much, too different? Is it going to make you a fan of a game style that you've never been a fan of before? Let me know what you think in the comments, as well as what your favorite game in the series is. I'd love to hear about it. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and have a great day.